My very dear friend, Professor Rajesh Chakravarti, Mr. Amit Agnihotri, Professor Mitra, eminences gathered here, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I think first and foremost, I want to, because I'm here, I want to congratulate MDI, its faculty, its director, and all the students for this wonderful occasion of the Golden Jubilee. And I wish you all the best, and I wish, as I said in the director's office, that I hope in the decades to come, MDI, which has the potential to do so, will break through in the ranks of the top 20 management schools in the world. And I think that's what the ambition that we should have. And I think that's the vision that we should work with, because there is no reason at all that Indian institutes do not and cannot aspire to go there. And which I think I hope I won't disappoint, but I'll touch upon the Indian economy a little later. But I had thought that I'll try and talk in my time, 20 minutes that I have, on the state of the management education in India at the moment. And I think and what needs to change, what we can do to make it globally competitive, and then connect it to the Indian economy as we go forward. So I'm sure all of this you know this, and I hope it's not too repetitive, that the management education has actually just sort of mushroomed almost in this country. I mean, that's the word to use maybe. 3,000 institutes teaching 8,500 courses, with the, it's just, it's a very large segment and of very varied quality across the regions and across the sectors. And I think that's something that we need to reckon with. Although on the one hand, there are about 35 Indian management institutes which have broken through the QS 1300 sort of, ranks, but they are just 35 out of the 3,000. So that's very good. I mean, that's excellent. But on the other hand, there is a fact that the India Skills Report, which I just checked, is a semi-official report, brought out by VBox in collaboration with AICTE and CII and everybody else, tells us that 46% of our graduates out of these management schools are unemployable today. And that's something which we need to really work on, because, and this is an improvement, I'm told by this report, of 1% over last year. Half of our students going out of these management schools not being employable is something that we really need to think through at this point of time, because how do we, and we need to, of course, change that. And there is a big regional variation across these schools, and also, and so I think the role of improving quality, the time has come for making quality an integral part of management education, because that will be the way when it can contribute the most, its real potential to the Indian economic growth as we go forward. And I think here we need to review the regulatory regime that is there, and also the accreditation regime that we have today in this field. Because I think, and the Prime Minister has said this in the 15th August speech, just a few months ago, that the time has come to review our regulatory and compliance burden completely, and to make it much more friendlier, much more, and sort of like much more based on trust and long-term thinking and long-term, building and vision, etc., rather than to be, caught in some sort of a bureaucratic, mindset of regulating and controlling, etc. And I think that's where, we need to build upon it. And that, I think, is the part of the government. And I think we in NITI Aayog would look forward to your, inputs on this, on how to improve this, because I think management is such an important part of our higher education that we need to think through as to how to improve this, and how to get more and more contribution from the faculty in management schools to policy making into our country, which I again think is much less than what could it be. I think that's where we need to work on. But there is, of course, a lot that can be done by the management institutes themselves. And this is and which is, you can refer to, the faculty-student ratio. I think it's much more here, much less here, much lower here than it's in the top universities abroad. I believe FMS Delhi, if I'm not wrong, I hope to be corrected, 25:1 student to faculty ratio. In other countries, in other management institutes which are very small, private, etc., it's probably 40:1 if I'm but in the top schools in the other countries, it's about 10:1. So how do we handle this? How do we do this? What are the cost requirements? How do we manage the balance between costs and quality? How do we balance between access and quality? All of that, I think, needs to be thought through. The other point, of course, is the quality of our faculty. All of you sitting here, as to what sort of training programs we have for the faculty, for the skill improvement, for their own exposure to the best. What kind of how do we bring our faculty into a process of continuous learning on the job, because that's what is required in these days of changing technology, changing environment, globalization, our interaction. The faculty must be on a continuous learning situation. And what do we do to enable that? And then, as you all know, the national education policy has emphasized the multi-dimensional nature of higher education. And I think this is, now today especially, even in our management, faculty, and this is where I want to, relate this to the onset of artificial intelligence in the world today. I mean, I've been reading some books and some papers, etc., which tell me that the artificial intelligence is now upon us. It's there. It's there in our, it's there in our mobile smartphones. It's there in our laptops, and this is going to pose the biggest challenge that we as humanity, as Homo sapiens, will face, because AI is already threatened many jobs and many roles in the society. And now AI is beginning to become better than human brain power, as it were. Alpha Zero, which is the best chess program in the world, at the MIT, the discovery of the helicin, medicine, retrovirus medicine, which was beyond what the human beings had thought of. Why am I referring to this? Is that because of AI and the necessary inclusion of AI in our work stream tomorrow, how do we change management programs? The conclusion of many studies is that we have to make management a multi-dimensional profession, which has got much more emotional quotient than intelligence quotient in it, or than professional, the professional expertise in it. Students will learn professional expertise of the AI, which is, by all through distant learning. What do we bring to the students is, I think, much greater need for empathy with each other, much greater requirement for the cultural side of what we are, much greater inputs on what we can do with fine arts and with our nature, with environment and so on, which is where AI may not yet be transgressing. Why am I saying this? Is that the time has come for us to rethink how we deliver management education, and how do we and which form and in how many dimensions do we deliver it. How do we create complete human beings, which at one time were known as Renaissance people, and not just narrow, not just people with a very narrow range of thinking and specialized skills, which are bound in silos and can't act beyond their silos. Connecting silos, connecting dots, thinking horizontally, building children who are thinking innovatively from the very beginning, who can be greatly adaptable, greatly flexible, very nimble. Already in America, people change almost 3.7 professions in their lifetime. This will come upon us. How do we make this, all of this happen? I think this is where I would hope that, management education, both offline in classrooms and online, hybrid, because that also is going to be a necessity. How will management education, I hope, will design itself to these emerging realities, and so that India can take advantage of AI and not feel it to be and not to be on the defensive when this comes upon us, as it will going forward. Now here again, there is a big challenge on us, and Professor Chakravarti, I'm sure you are very well aware of it, that the national education policy calls for a 50% gross enrollment ratio in higher education. I think it's about what? It's about 27% at the moment. The world average is 37%. Now if you want to go up to 50%, that means you need to create 4 crore more seats in higher education institutions. Will that be achieved with the acceptable quality? And how will that be achieved with acceptable quality? It of course cannot be just brick and mortars, as beautiful as they might be as this campus is. It will have to be hybrid. It will have to be online and offline. How do we design online courses which are attractive, which arouse curiosity, which make students think ahead, and are in sync with our cultural and social ethos and ethics? I think is something that we need to think through. We can't just borrow online courses from those developed in the Western universities and so on. So I think this is again a huge challenge facing the management community, management teaching community, as to how to design online courses which are in sync, as it were, which take from our traditions, which take from our proud traditions, and bring to the fore and combine it with modern thinking, combine it with scientific thinking, so that it becomes interesting. And these must be therefore in all our vernacular languages. It cannot be in English, because otherwise it will not be in sync with our cultural and social and traditional norms. That's the biggest challenge that India has today, and which is that we need to develop these courses so that they can be taught as far as possible in the mother tongue, and take from the cultural diversity of our country. That's the. Before I come to the economy, let me make one other point, and which is that I hope all of us recognize how unique our country is and what are the huge challenges that we face. No other country, my dear friends, in the world history has faced the challenge of transitioning from a poor economy and a very low rate of literacy at the time of its independence, from transitioning from a poor economy to a middle income economy, while at the same time simultaneously facing the challenge of inclusion, a necessary challenge of inclusion and making it broad-based, the growth broad-based, and even more so of environmental concerns, the carbon footprint. Everybody else who did it, even till China, they just grew now, and they said they will retrofit afterwards. India cannot afford to do this. India cannot afford also to do what the Western economies did, which is to create huge inequalities and then take charge of some of the poorer people through their welfare state. Our democracy will not permit it at all. So we have to necessarily think of the triple bottom line. And this is what, again, I say this because this is the challenge for emerging corporate leaders, which you are of here and which you nurture in these institutes. How do you nurture corporate leaders who are constantly thinking not about maximizing profits? That's 18th century. That's 19th century. In the 21st century, companies which only maximize profits are bound to fail. It is only those companies which will take care of the environment around them, and the companies which will take care of the equity and the people around them which will succeed. And you can see this in real terms, in the real world, as which are the best companies today in the world. And you will notice it is those companies which are serving a social purpose. And this is why the rise of the social impact investors in the world. And this is the challenge again for the management education today. We have to change this thing and think afresh. And business as usual will not do. And business as usual is also, and this is where is also will not do in the way we think about economic growth. And this is what I think under the leadership of our Prime Minister, we have given primacy to taking care of those at the bottom of the pyramid, whether it's the JAM Trinity, whether it is the Jan Dhan account, whether it's the Saubhag or the Ujjwala schemes, and the Beti Bachao, the innumerable number of schemes. The step has been taken, or the free distribution of rations to the 800 million, etc., or the Ayushman Bharat, that we need to take care of those at the bottom of the pyramid, because unless we do that, our social and political fabric will not permit us to just keep growing. And these reforms have been very major ones. Along with that, there is also a deepest commitment of this government that the economic growth in this country will happen through private investors, through private entrepreneurs, through private enterprise. Government can't lead the growth path. And this private enterprise and private investors, therefore the government has taken again a number of steps to make the investment climate as friendly and keep improving it as far as possible. Not only have we climbed in the ranks of the World Bank's ease of doing business, but now the latest call by the Prime Minister to ease the regulatory and compliance burden. And I'm sure you know that there are 67,000 compliance and regulatory and compliance burden all put together in our country. 67,000 if you add all the states and the central government requirements. These need to be reviewed thoroughly. And NITI Aayog is in the business of interacting with every state, to show, please draw up your lists of the regulatory and compliance burdens. How many licenses do you require to open a business? How many licenses do you require? The fact that schools need essentiality certificate every year, even if they have a waiting list of 5 years, is completely, it's just amazing. I was told, on my way here that management schools have to get an approval every year to be able to run. Why? What on earth for? And I'm going to take this up with the concerned authorities. These are requirements and regulatory compliance burden. The Doon School Board wrote to me to say that they have 600 compliances to fulfill every year. They have a whole department for compliances. And I looked at the list, and it was amazing, 600 to go through. And I sort of almost dozed off, as it were. But repeatedly there were things which could have been done away with. We are committed to do this, and you will see a new environment emerging as we go forward. And it is on the basis of these huge number of reforms, whether it is faceless assessment or the rise in the level at which you can appeal, but the government can appeal, or the judicial reforms that we are trying to undertake, or the insolvency and bankruptcy code, or the GST, or the fact of the sort of I can go on with this as to the large number of reforms that we have taken to improve the investor climate, the reduction in the corporate tax rate, if you like, all of those. I know that there are still many more to go, many more to be done, but we are cognizant of those and we are trying to undertake them, and a large number have been done already. On the basis of this and the fact that we will grow at 10% or more this year, 21-22, and that the majority of the multilateral financial institutions, IMF, World Bank, ADB, Development Bank, New Development Bank, etc., their consensus is that we will grow at about 8% in financial year 22-23. That's their consensus, about 8. That some people have 8. IMF said 8.5, but the consensus is about 8%. My bet is that we will grow at 8% plus in the coming 5 to 10 years, and that will what will happen. And I think we are entering a period. We are on the cusp of a major transformation of the Indian economy. and also because which is necessary. We have to become an innovative economy. We have to become an R&D technology-based economy. You know that we have within NITI Aayog the Atal Innovation Mission, which has set up already in the last 3 years 9,000 Atal Tinkering Labs. The target is to set up 50,000 of these in secondary schools, so that the children who come out of there are no more products of rote learning. They are products of people who are already exposed to electronic benches and optical sensors and 3D printing, and exposed and encouraged to ask the question why in these labs. And so I'm giving you that example simply to say that, at the base, the pyramid is changing, and therefore the whole edifice will have to change. And the Indian economy will have to make use of the latest technologies, will have to conquer the artificial intelligence and not lag behind it. We will have to invest much more in R&D than the mere 0.8% that we do now, and therefore make the next decades our own decades, and a period where we can hopefully sustain 8% plus growth for next 3 decades, so that when the time comes for celebrating our centenary of independence, India will be, I'm sure, by that, the second and surely the third largest economy in the world. And that is also what is the responsibility of of you graduates, which is to start thinking as global citizens, and the responsibility of the faculty to train them to think as global citizens who will have the responsibility of a large burden of carrying this world forward in an era where we are in sync with our environment, and we are happily much more inclusive and not divided amongst ourselves, and not cognizant and not respectful of hierarchies as we go forward in this world. And I hope, therefore, that MDI will lead the march in making India one of the leading economies and the leading societies of the world. Thank you all very much.